Hey guys, how's it going? So we are going to get started. We are going to start a piece of art that actually focuses on color. So these are the things you're going to need. You're going to need your sketchbook, you're going to need a pencil, and you're actually going to need a loose piece of white paper. So I just grabbed copy paper, like printer paper. If not, you can also actually use notebook paper. You essentially just need a blank separate sheet of paper that is thin. So even notebook paper will work really well for this. And you're going to need a ruler, okay? And we're going to get started. So you're actually making two paintings or drawings, depending on what materials you have. And they're actually going to be the same. But next week, we're going to add different colors to them to try to change the emotions that we get from them. So today's goal is to do our drawing part. So on your sketchbook, what you're going to do is you need to make two rectangles that are about 4 inches by 7 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my ruler across the bottom of my paper, and I want to get it pretty close to the bottom so I'm not taking up too much space. And I'm going to draw a 4-inch line. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's my 4-inch line. Now, I'm going to turn my ruler the other way, and I'm going to draw a line that goes up 7 inches. So I've lined it up to 7, and there's 7. And same thing on the other side. I'm going to try to keep this as straight as I can. Actually, we'll start at the top and do our 4 inches across. So you're making two rectangles that are 4 inches by 7 inches. And I'll just double check this to make sure it's still 7, and it is. And there's our first one. Now, I'm going to repeat this over here. Same thing. I want a rectangle that is 4 inches by 7 inches. And then two lines that come down that are 7, and then we will be good to go. Now, what you're going to be doing this week is you have to make an abstract composition. That means you're using lines and shapes. It doesn't need to necessarily look like anything. It doesn't need to look like an object. But you're using different lines and shapes to fill up this area. And when you do this, you want to think about a particular emotion. So this emotion can be something you've felt recently, or it can be something somebody else has felt recently. It's completely up to you which emotion you pick. Now, what's going to be interesting is when we add color, we're going to try to change the emotion from one to the other, to a different one, using just color. So remember, this week, we're just doing the drawing part. So in this rectangle, I'm actually going to consider some of the lines and shapes that were in the previous slide. So in the previous slide, there were different examples of how different lines can show some different emotions. So for me, I've actually been doing a little bit of meditation since this has all started, since our online learning, believe it or not, to kind of calm me down a little bit sometimes when I get a little overly excited. So I think some wavy lines for more relaxing feeling is more appropriate. So I'm going to be using some wavy lines throughout my shape. Now I can actually change this up a little bit. So from here, I can come down and around and break up my space a little bit. Now, if you want, you can also practice this on a separate piece of paper until you get a design that you like, and come back to it. So those are some of the lines I've picked for my emotion. Now, in between these, believe it or not, when I think about the emotions I have when, I'm calm or trying to meditate, even when you're doing those things, sometimes little emotions sneak in and catch you by surprise. So, for example, zigzag lines to me show kind of like a disruption, something that gets in the way. So every now and then, I'm going to add one of those lines to my design. Because oddly enough, even when you meditate and you try to calm down, sometimes those little things kind of sneak into your head as well. Now, when you're finished with your design and you're happy with what you have, the tricky part is we are going to have to recreate this over here. And we have to get it as close to exactly the same over here. Because what we're going to do is next week when we add color to this, we're going to have one emotion here with a certain set of colors and one emotion over here with a different set of colors. So this is what I'm going to do. I have my design right here, and I'm going to put this piece of printer paper on top. And as you can see, well, a little bit, I can actually see through this. I can actually see through it pretty well. That's why notebook paper is also good, because notebook paper is so thin. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to trace my design through the paper. And I'm actually even going to draw the straight lines of the rectangles so I don't get lost, so I don't lose anything. And when I do this, I am intentionally pressing a little bit firmer with my pencil so more graphite gets on the paper, which is actually very important. You want more graphite on your paper so when we transfer it over, you'll be able to see it on the other side. And you'll see my little trick for that in just a second. So if you've ever tried to copy something exactly and never been able to freehand it, this is actually a good little trick a lot of people use to do that. Because what you're doing is you're making a carbon transfer, which was an older thing people used to do with carbon paper so they could have duplicates of things like checks and things like that and important paperwork. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure there's a good amount of graphite on this. So here is my copy. Now, I need to transfer this to here. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure my lines are pretty dark, that there's plenty of pencil on them, lots of graphite from my pencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to flip it over. And I need to line it up to my other rectangle, which is a little tricky. So sometimes I have to press it down so I can see through it pretty well. And if you're using notebook paper, just be careful of the lines. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace my design. I'm actually not going to trace the outline of the rectangle. I don't want to do that. I'm going to trace my design through my paper. And I'm actually going to go over it a couple of times. I'm going to go over the lines a few times each. And what will eventually happen is I will get a faint outline of my design on my sketchbook. And it will look just like my first drawing. So this part I don't have to be as neat. I just need to make sure I press down pretty firmly so the pencil, the graphite that's on the other side, actually presses to my sketchbook paper. And again, this is a really good trick if you ever need to make a copy of a drawing or duplicate something. This is a really good way to do that, so you can get a symmetrical design or an even design. It's a nice little trick. Remember, you want to go over it once or twice, probably twice, just to be safe. So all of your lines go through, and you will be able to see it very clearly. And there we go. So I'm done. I'm going to lift this up, and I see a pretty faint outline of my design. So what I need to do, and this is going to be our last step for this week, is I need to go ahead and go over it again with my pencil so I can just see it a little bit more clearly, so it's not so faint. And I'm going to go ahead and trace this out now that I can see it on my paper. And what I have is a reflection of my first drawing. Now remember, these are abstract drawings, so they don't need to necessarily look like objects. They just need to have lines and patterns that convey an emotion for you. And sometimes there will just be one line that didn't quite line up, and that's okay, that happens. And those you just erase and don't worry about. And I'm going to keep going all the way across until I'm done with this design. And when you have your duplicate, all you have to do is go back in, clean it up a little bit, and you have your two designs that we will be using next week for color. So what you are going to be handing in this week is just one picture of this page with your two designs. You do not need to add color this week, okay? I can't say that enough. It's not this week you're adding color. That'll be next week that we do that. So once you are done with your two, make sure you take a photograph of this and attach it to the Google Classroom assignment. And then next week is when we get into the color part. Have a good week, guys.